Well, the president is pushing hard for the U.S. to strike a new nuclear deal. In the past 24 hours, the U.S. deal with Russia expired. It has set limits on the size of each nation's nuclear arsenal and also limited the type of warheads each nation could hold on to. Now, the president is pushing for a revamped deal that would also include China, who is quickly upping its stockpile numbers. The president posting on social media, in part right here, rather than extend a new start, a badly negotiated deal by the U.S. that, aside from everything else, is being grossly violated. We should have our nuclear experts work on a new, improved, and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. Now, at this point, there are no formal extensions of the agreement between U.S. and Russia, and no word of when a possible new deal could even be on the table.
I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. They're small enough to fit on a truck, but powerful enough to run an entire town. Nuclear microreactors are drawing growing attention as a possible solution for clean, reliable energy. But major hurdles remain before they show up in local communities.
When many people think of nuclear power, they picture massive plants spanning hundreds of acres. But a new generation of technology could shrink that footprint dramatically. Nuclear microreactors are the smallest type of nuclear reactor, producing less than 20 megawatts of power. Small enough to ship by truck, but strong enough to supply a data center, a college campus, or a small town.
Like replacing a remote diesel generator in an Alaskan village or at a remote mine site. The administration is supporting all of these efforts.
The U.S. Army is now moving closer to making these a reality. As part of its Janus program, the Army has identified 9 installations under consideration to host microreactor power plants, including Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, and Fort Drum. Army leaders say on-site nuclear power would help protect bases from grid failures and from cyber or physical attacks on civilian energy infrastructure.
I want to thank President Trump for making a nuclear renaissance possible.
The administration says it's pushing for a broad range of next-generation nuclear technologies.
Ultimately, we'll demo probably 10 different reactor designs in the next 24 months. Very exciting times. I think we'll see shovels in the ground building small modular reactors.
Unlike traditional nuclear plants that take years to build, microreactors are designed to be factory built and deployed quickly. But that speed comes with a catch. Companies need major upfront investment to build factories, while potential customers want to see the technology proven before placing orders.
And after decades of public mistrust around nuclear power, community acceptance may be the biggest hurdle for this new technology when it's ready for community use. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Later this week, White House Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are expected to travel to Istanbul to discuss a potential nuclear deal with Iran. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And of course, there is what the Trump administration wants out of these nuclear talks versus what is likely best case scenario and agreement, right?
Yeah, so President Trump, he's made his main goal pretty clear here, which is just essentially ensuring that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. So that's the main objective driving these diplomatic efforts. And that entails things like Iran would need to shut down its uranium enrichment program, also accepting major limits on its missile program. And also the U.S. wants Iran to stop throwing money and weapons at its regional proxy militias, groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. So those are kind of the main objectives when it comes to these negotiations.
And since the strikes from last year, much has obviously developed. Do experts anticipate a shift in these nuclear talks? What else are you learning?
So Nate Swanson, who is the director of the Iran Strategy Project at the Atlantic Council, he wrote a really interesting piece about these potential talks, and he said that the meetings could serve as kind of a strategic purpose beyond just basic negotiations. So he talked about the possibility that they could keep Iran off balance, buy time, and give the U.S. some leverage ahead of potential military or economic pressure that could come, rather than signifying kind of a quick shift to diplomacy, especially considering the fact that Iran just massacred thousands of protesters. So there's a lot of complexities and things at play here.
Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
In a few moments, Emma will join us to dig deeper into the protests happening in Iran and how a potential nuclear deal could impact them.
And thank you for being here with us. I'm Didi Gatton. And as we come back on the air, plans for U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are back on tonight, restarting a delicate diplomatic situation that could still end with President Trump ordering military action against Tehran. Ryan Smith at the live desk with more. Ryan?
Yeah, delicate developments here indeed, Didi. That high-stakes meeting will continue now in Oman instead of Turkey. That change in venue comes as the U.S. considered backing out of these talks. But top officials, they pivoted back at the urging of several Middle Eastern leaders. Now, tensions really ramping up this week between the two countries. There are now renewed U.S. threats against Iran. The Trump administration balancing military escalation while also publicly pushing for diplomacy.
If the Iranians want to meet, we're ready. They've expressed an interest in meeting and talking. If they change their mind, we're fine with that, too. We prefer to meet and talk. I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys, but we're going to try to find out. We don't see there's any harm in trying to figure out there's something that can be done. This is a president that always prefers a peaceful outcome to any conflict or any challenge.
And just today, President Trump speaking directly with Xi Jinping about Iran as the administration really pushes Beijing and others to isolate the Iranian regime. In this social media post, Trump highlighting the trade aspects of his conversation with the Chinese leader. Trump and Xi are expected to meet in person in China this April, with China's president invited to the U.S. for a state visit later this year.
And this morning, right here at the live desk, we're following the expiration of the nuclear treaty between the U.S. and Russia. The deal has set limits on the size of each nation's nuclear arsenal and the type of nuclear warheads it could actually house. Now that this deal has essentially expired, some experts fear it could kick off a nuclear arms race. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. would not agree to maintain the limits of the treaty, citing President Trump's call for a new nuclear deal between the U.S., Russia, and China. While uncertainty is playing out at this point out there, it's also playing out between Russia and Ukraine. A second round of trilateral talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. Began in the past 24 hours. The talks to hopefully, of course, end the war comes after Russia resumes strikes against Ukraine's biggest cities and on their energy grid as well. The attack, the largest so far this year, came after a brief ceasefire set up by President Trump and Putin. We're tracking these developments coming out of the Middle East all morning long.
I'm Atra El-Nashar in Washington. High-stakes nuclear talks with Iran and the United States taking place in Oman Friday morning. Leaders emerging from the talks appeared willing to meet again. And the world is watching closely as the two countries flex their military might in the Middle East.
The United States and Iran testing the waters of potential cooperation to avoid an all-out conflict. Hosted by Oman's Foreign Minister Saeed Badr al-Busaidi in the capital of Muscat, Iran's Foreign Minister and President Trump's special envoy and son-in-law remained in separate rooms as Oman's top diplomat mediated back and forth. It was useful to clarify both Iranian and American thinking and identify areas for possible progress. Oman's foreign minister says, "We aim to reconvene in due course, with the results to be considered carefully in Tehran and Washington."
I think I can say this is a good start. We must overcome this period of distrust. Trust must be there.
That distrust made worse in the past year by U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and the Iranian regime's execution of what's believed to be thousands of its own people during nationwide protests. Almost immediately after the talks wrapped, the U.S. Treasury announced new sanctions on individuals, entities, and vessels tied to illicit trade of Iranian oil.
Iran was the first to publicly express their intention to meet again. It's an open question how long President Trump will be willing to see the diplomatic process play out, given the armada, as he calls it, that the U.S. military's built up near Iran. Here was the White House press secretary Thursday.
While these negotiations are taking place, I would remind the Iranian regime that the president has many options at his disposal, aside from diplomacy, as the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the history of the world.
Among the countries calling for de-escalation, Germany, Qatar, Turkey, and even Russia.
There are too many mines waiting to go off, just waiting for someone to tread on them.
Russia calling Iran its close partner and neighbor. Diplomats from the two countries huddling Thursday before the talks in Oman. The same day, the U.S.-Russia New START nuclear arms treaty expired. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar reporting.